Hello and welcome. I'm delighted to tell you that Will Steger is back with me tonight, and we're going to talk during this half hour on a fascinating solo expedition he just did this past spring, 2023. We're taping now on October 23rd, 2023. He did this in Northwest Territories up to the Arctic Circle, and all kinds of stories from him that we'll get to hear. So welcome
Good to
back,
be back,
Will.
Mary. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you here. Well, this trip, 600 miles as it turned out, totally solo. Tell us the route, the general route, and we'll insert a map too.
Yeah, well, this was in the Northwest Territories, way northern Canada, right on the Arctic Circle. The Arctic Ocean was a little north, maybe 200 miles from there. It's extremely rugged country. No one travels in it at all anymore. And I was traveling through mostly rivers. And I've been doing these solos for a number of years, probably the last 10 years. And I always leave right in the end of winter when it's still really cold. And on this one I was unsupported. In other words, I had to carry all my food and supplies for 60 days for 2 months.
So it started out, you said 280 pounds
280
worth of
pounds, yeah.
food and tent and equipment.
Yeah, which is pretty heavy, and I weigh 140, so it's twice my weight.
Yeah.
And starting out, I had three sleds that were 6 feet
Packed.
long. Yeah, and then and on board that sled was 60 days of food and my winter gear, but then also a small raft, 8-foot raft, whitewater raft that stacks down into a 10-pound bag.
Oh, wow.
And,
so inflatable.
Inflatable, yeah. My canoe paddles, everything. So I had to have gear from the winter to right up to the summer. It was packed in there. And then I left on the Coppermine River, which is a very wild river, a very wild country. And then I went up the first divide during the very last part of the winter, when it was still snow and cold and storms. And
so you skied on the
yeah, I skied
on that river
on that part, and it was frozen mostly. And I was going some cross country through, and the load was so heavy I had to double pack it. So in order, if you go 10 miles forward, you have to go 30, 10 back, 10 forward, 10 back to get your load, and 10 forward. So I double loaded it across
so
there.
that really adds the miles.
And then then the thaw came earlier, which is to be predictable, and then I was on the rivers going down the divide when it was breaking up, which is extremely dangerous.
So the water's icy cold.
Icy cold and breaking up in heavy rapids. And in this time of the season, there's no rescue. In other words, a plane can't get into you on skis or floats. So I was basically on my own.
Would there have been, was there a reason that you really wanted to do it at this dangerous time? Could you not have waited and done it when?
I was looking for, the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, and I built up over the period of time, skills in that. I did a number of solos before.
Right.
In the spring breakup.
It's kind of tradition now,
yeah,
isn't it?
always on lakes, and I avoided rivers because I was really deathly afraid of the current under the rivers. But 10 years ago, I decided to challenge that fear of rivers, and I started in the Boundary Waters the first 3 or 4 years of that, and doing, the Boundary Water is really dangerous when it's in the rivers when it breaks up. I built up my skill level, and then I went further north in Manitoba, Ontario, that break up in bigger rivers, and then about 5 years ago, then I went back up to the Arctic where the real wilderness is there. I'm 400 or 500 miles in places away from the nearest person, but it's the most incredible wilderness, as rugged as you can imagine. And so it's a combination of incredible beauty and a lot of danger, and a lot of wildlife.
Was it harder than you thought it would be, Will, as an expedition
yeah,
solo?
it's a good question, because the expeditions, when you think about an expedition before you go into it, there's no way of going into the thought of what the expedition really going to be. So you think, I usually just think of the first couple of days, but it's never what you thought it would be ever. Huh? It's never that way. So on these expeditions, you know, I really wanted to push my learning and my knowledge. In particular, I really wanted to push that in a dangerous situation to push my skills, but also to be in the moment all the time. Because, you know, when you're climbing, you're on a cliff, you're in the moment, you're paying attention, but then after you're done climbing, you're in the moment. And many people saw this movie, Free Solo, about this guy that soloed.
Yes, I saw that.
So that was absolutely in the moment.
Right,
going
the whole
up
thing.
But as soon as he got on top, he's talking to his girlfriend on the phone. He's out of the moment. But on the solo expedition, I'm in that moment all the time, 24
And you
hours.
described that in one of your audio reports back to civilization, that you loved that. You loved that feeling of in the moment. There's something about it that's so exhilarating.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In the moment, it's hard to explain the moment. I mean, that's what one of my goals in my life would be to explain, you know, what an expedition really is about for myself. And it's really being in that moment. You're in the moment when you're in love, when you're dancing, when you see a sunset. You know, we all experience that moment at certain times.
In different ways.
A lot of times it's fleeting, but when you're in that moment, there's not a thought process. You're out of your worries, your concepts, your mind. You're not in this craziness
you're not looking forward or backward or...
No, there isn't. And that's what it was for myself for a full 50 days on that expedition. And it turned out to be, again, I didn't have expectations, but it turned out that I was on for a full 50 days. I mean, it was a constant challenge in so many different ways.
When you get back from that kind of intensity, are you exhausted? Are you kind of...
No, you know, that's a good question, too.
So happy that it went well, that you're energized?
Yeah, most of the time I mean, you're in a rapids and you're going down a canyon, you've got a surprise in that. And I had some rapids that I've never been in rapids like this.
So level 5 probably.
Yeah, they were just beyond it. And the tip over here was, you know, there was no rescue and the water was freezing cold. During that whole day where I was out, I was shell-shocked and really like that. But most of the time when you're in the moment like this, it's very calm, it's peaceful, you're energized.
But that was like a little too much
just what happened that
drama.
particular day. I mean, that's the
that
expedition.
day.
Yeah, you don't know what's a lot of times. But I came back on all these expeditions, but particularly this one, you know, I came back with such incredible energy. But it charges your energy rather than being hectic and crazy, because there's enough of that in this life here.
Right,
And I live a life of, my other 10 months, I'm forming the Steger Center, fundraising. I'm always, don't have enough money, you know, I'm always building.
And that's probably
it's a constant,
not a real fun thing to do. I mean,
well, it is. It's a purposeful thing, but it's, most people don't take on pushing their limits like that. I mean, that's a different type of situation. But it requires lots of energy all the time, and that solos really regenerate myself. It's a real retreat of my mind, and when I come back, I have all this energy for the next 10 months. And but the solos and the expeditions all through my life have been a very important part of my life, especially now the solos. The international teams I did for 25 years, that was a different type of expedition, but the solo right now, especially at this stage of my life, very important. And
that's amazing. I think we acknowledged earlier he's 79 now, and you know, you don't look at it, and you certainly don't live like a 79-year-old man or woman, but it's just, it sounds great, the wonderful payoff you get personally for these dangerous trips.
Yeah. But you know, it's dangerous walking across the street if you're not paying attention.
It can be,
and
yes.
It's more dangerous downtown Minneapolis. I mean, the trips are dangerous, yes, but if you're paying attention, and especially, you know, you have a knowledge base that you're working from, and I'm always adding, you know, you never peak out, at least I never peak out, because life is all evolution, and it's always a learning experience, and whatever happens, you know, failure is not trying, so anything we try, we're evolving.
Or Thoreau said, failure is if you don't learn from something that you did wrong.
Right.
I always liked that,
That's a good
definition
point, yeah.
too.
Yep.
You know, if we don't learn. When you have this kind of exhilaration, well, how do you sleep then? I mean, you're sleeping in a tent. You're sleeping some of the time when it's pretty cold.
Yeah.
Not the best conditions for a great night's sleep, but
Yeah.
are you tired enough you sleep well in spite of the exhilaration?
Well, it's not, you know, it's not all exhilaration like a caffeine high. Sometimes it's so beautiful and things like that happen. But but you're also traveling through storms, and it's really
Right.
tough sometimes. And it still is beautiful in a storm when it's hard. I mean, it's all, so, but at the end of the day, regardless of what you're doing, you're totally exhausted because you put
Okay,
in a
so your
10,
sleep
12
is
hour
not
day.
a worry that you
No,
won't sleep.
and the dreams are very good.
Okay.
And you know, I have enough food. I mean, you know, you can always. I didn't have to ration food, put it that way.
Well, that's good.
And
And you could, I mean, you could call out and say I'm in trouble, but what do you mean when you say it'd be hard to get help? They might know you're in trouble, but they couldn't get to you. Is that?
Yeah.
Am I understanding
I know.
correctly?
I mean, there's places in this world that you can't get to.
Yeah, that you couldn't land
No.
a plane
No.
or find you maybe.
Tough.
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds.
But and also too. But I do have a GPS emergency system. I carry that on me. That's extremely important because
Okay.
you do, you know, on a real all-out emergency there, a plane can't land. Maybe you know, people say, why can't you get a helicopter? Well, you know, a helicopter can only fly a short distance, and to get a helicopter of a long distance, you know, it's a real complicated thing.
Yeah, they'd have to bring it
Yeah.
on another plane probably
Yeah.
or some.
But
That
you-
could be a
But then
major
where would that plane
expense.
land? Yeah. But you know, there's a safety factor with the GPS and the modern day technologies that you know I do have. But then a lot of the issues you can get into if you just lost an arm to a grizzly bear, or if you're in super cold water and you can't get out, all your
Right.
emergency stuff. So you're in that situation where you have to be self-reliant.
Right,
And,
right. And you did see wildlife,
lots of wildlife.
a lot
yeah,
of wildlife.
yeah.
What was the most dangerous aspect in that regard?
Well, the wildlife, the area that I've traveled through I've been through some of this in the regions off and on for many years. But that area up until maybe 30 years ago, I would have run into some native people because the native people lived off the land. They hunted and trapped. They trapped for their furs, and that they were able to trade for food, and so
Right.
they were self-sufficient. That does not longer exist anymore. 'Cause
Really? And why is that?
the fur trade in the 70s was, you know, they collapsed the fur trade, and that broke their economy, and that destroyed basically the real culture of the Inuit and the northern Indian
so
people,
they,
the Dene people.
They have fled that area then,
That was their home.
right?
And then for the last 200-300 years they've trapped, and they've trapped sustainable because they didn't kill all the animals off.
Right.
They trapped, and the animals, you know, perpetuated, and it supported them. And
So it was
the,
working.
the
Yeah.
native people with the Indian people, the Dene people, you know, in the forests they have wood for their shelters, wood for their heat, meat for their family, and then the trading. And then when that disappeared because furs became unpopular, that
sure.
destroyed the culture. I mean, and it did. I mean, the native people are so kind, but they will talk about that a little bit, but they're not like angry because it happened and they accepted it. What happened? They moved into communities. You know, they weren't they're nomadic people.
Uh-huh.
You know,
So
the
now
native people
there are
nomadic.
some villages.
Yeah, they don't live in villages in the older days. They are nomadic, and they might have a small village that they would, you know, their central hub, so to speak. But then they're no longer nomadic, and are hunters and trappers, and therefore the land now is empty.
Wow,
It's
there's a change that's
it's like before
major.
humankind probably came in this area maybe 12,000, maybe
Yeah.
14,000 years ago. Now there's nobody there.
It's kind of the opposite of what's happening, you know, all over the
Yeah.
rest of the world, where
Yeah.
it's getting more crowded. And
Yeah. But then what happens in the wildlife is like almost tame, except for, you know, grizzly bears.
Oh,
So they you know, the moose, you know, there'd be a moose in the river, and I'd be floating by it quietly, and the moose would have its head underwater feeding, and would look up at me, and then put its head in the water again, just when paying attention.
he would say, "What a small-looking moose, and
Yeah.
unusual."
Yeah, I didn't even think. And then the muskox that I saw.
Yeah, you saw muskox,
Yeah, and they weren't,
which,
you know, they were. It's almost like you know, it's like before human beings.
yeah, I'm thinking. I had asked Will earlier about the muskox, and it's like a prehistoric mammal,
It's
isn't
almost
it?
it's a remnant of the prehistoric animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, very thick fur, and they're.
Yeah,
They live
very
in-
interesting to
yeah.
see, I bet.
Yeah.
Did you get a photo of?
I did, yeah. I
Oh,
filmed some of
good.
them, yeah.
Maybe we can insert that if,
Yeah, yeah,
if you can
yeah,
find it.
we could do that, yeah. Actually, we could do
That'd
that.
be fun. Well, so no terribly dangerous trouble with wild animals.
Not in this
Not
time
in this
around.
trip.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
fortunate this year.
What was the most scary part of this trip, would you say?
Yeah, well, it was I was when the ice is breaking up. There's like a massive, it floods in a massive way. I mean, little little
sure.
streams turn into these torrents.
Oh,
And it was the day I went into this. No, you know, there wasn't any maps that showed rapids, and I could read the country
sure.
sort of okay. And I heard the rapids that evening, but I got into this section of ultra flood. I couldn't get out of it, and so I just had to go down it for a period of 4 or 5 hours straight. And
Oh
I
my
ended up in
gosh.
a canyon and I mean, rapids I've never been in my life, but I was just had to be right on
oh, I
all
bet.
the time, and it was like, you know, it was.
Did you have a wetsuit that?
Yeah, I had a dry suit. Yeah, you have to have a dry suit. A wetsuit is when you get in the water and it's wet in your skin. That wetsuit is okay for just a short period of time.
Okay.
But the dry suit is totally dry. It's sealed
Oh,
in your
okay.
hands, feet,
Okay.
and then you insulate underneath there.
So
you
that'd
can,
be really important.
yeah. So when you're in the water, you can last an hour in a dry suit,
Mm.
and you couldn't. I couldn't have done expeditions like this 20 years ago before there were dry suits.
Oh, I bet.
And that's a real important margin of error there, and then your life preserver. But you still can, you know, freeze in these waters. And
Sure.
the problem in the rapids was I could have easily, if I tipped over, I could have lost.
All your food.
Everything.
And then you'd been
Then I would
up
be
a
like,
creek.
yeah, I would have my emergency system on me, a minor amount of. I would have my knife and a few things and matches, so I could probably survive, and maybe do fish or something. But
gosh,
that
Will.
was the issue. So.
So, but you got through that, but 4 or 5 hours of
Yeah.
drama then.
Yeah, I'm on thin ice a lot, but then, you know, thin ice you can read, and you know your margins of errors, and you know, and especially if you know, if you're really there, when you're there in the moment, you can read things so calmly.
Yeah, you talked about that.
Yeah.
The inflatable raft, I'm thinking in this wild river section especially, were you worried it could get punctured and
Yeah.
there goes the raft?
Yeah, the raft it's a 10-pound raft that it collapses in a bag like this. It's used on the Colorado River.
Oh.
So it's a whitewater raft.
Okay.
And it's a special raft where the whole raft, you zip down the whole front and you stuff your gear inside the raft.
Kind of like a kayak
Yeah, you mean
design.
inside the flotation. You put your gear there, zip it down, then you blow it up.
Oh.
So you're not. I had sleds and skis and everything also on the top, which, you know, I was heavily loaded.
Oh, gosh,
But,
that seems cumbersome.
Yeah, but it's a specialized raft, and yeah, the danger was a number of things. One, in flood stage, you get a lot of trees that are in the water and
Oh,
branches
yeah.
that'll puncture it. And you get
Yeah.
sucked
That's
in
what I'm
that.
thinking. It's amazing it wasn't punctured.
Well, that's making your decisions on the routes down. That's all
Yeah.
part of.
And they must make the rubber as strong as they possibly can, but it's not
It's a
foolproof.
it's a very durable raft, but you won't take a heavy, real high, massive punch against a real sharp object. It
No,
will
you
go through it.
wouldn't. You wouldn't.
And then
That wouldn't work. But I'm trying to picture this. So on top of the raft, you've got your skis and other things tied onto this raft?
Yep. And then
Oh,
all the weights
gosh.
inside. The normal whitewater rafting trip is like 4 or 5 days, and your gear weighs what, 40, 50 pounds.
Right.
I have over 200 pounds in that raft.
This just sounds
And
almost like you would be just tossed crazily up and down and back and forth.
pretty stable, but you do use a kayak paddle, and it takes skill.
Yeah, oh my
And,
goodness. So you made it to the destination, but with a detour. We've got 5 minutes left, Will.
Yeah.
So your destination ended up being where?
Yeah, it's ironic. I ended up, I went 600 miles almost straight west along the Arctic Circle. I ended up on a small village called Good Hope.
How do you spell it?
Good Hope.
Oh,
Fort Good Hope,
just
yeah,
like
beautiful.
Good Hope. Okay.
Yeah, it's a Denai, or an Indian village, a small village on the McKenzie River. I've been through there 6 times before.
Ah.
And over the last 55 years, I've known 3 generations of people.
Oh, wow.
So
You had a little reunion with some
it
of
was really, really incredible.
Oh, I bet they love to see you.
Yeah, I've traveled 60 years in the villages, and I've been in almost all the villages, all the Inuit villages, and I know, a lot of people there, and I might disappear for 20 years and I show up again.
They must think of you as some kind of very unique American.
They don't even think that way. They just accept you who you are, and they think it's quite fascinating, because I know sometimes their parents or their grandparents. I talk to them about it.
Gosh,
And
yeah.
it's just a beautiful thing.
So watch for this man. He'll be coming back. Oh, that's great. And then you had a plane fly in to pick you up.
Yeah, actually, in the village there was because when I traveled through it in the last 60 years, it was very isolated. They have daily flights in and out.
They do.
Yeah.
This little
Yeah,
village.
Yeah, and it's now, now the villages are connected. They have, because this is the modern day, because, I didn't know what the village would look like because they're not on the land. I was concerned that, would people be in disarray? But it was a
Right.
thriving village.
Really?
They speak their own language. The children speak their own language.
Oh,
The
really?
younger children didn't even speak English.
Wow.
And they have their culture back. They weren't put on reservations there. They have their own destiny. They have control of their own land. And it
So
was
they're
just,
much happier as a group,
I mean,
bet.
a real culture. And I was absolutely almost envious of them.
I bet.
Because they actually had this native culture that, and control of their lives and their own destiny.
And they're making a living now via what kind of?
Well, there's work within the community, of course, and there's mining jobs. The jobs are always the issue, but since they have the flights and internet and that, and they have a whole network of villages. Yellowknife is the capital of the territory. So Yellowknife's about 40,000 people.
Right.
Jobs
That's
there. And,
we have, or I have heard, most people probably
Yeah, it's
heard about Yellowknife.
capital. That's actually my hometown. Ely's my hometown. My real hometown is Yellowknife.
Really?
Yeah, that's but that's.
Where you feel at home?
Yeah, it's
Do you mean?
40,000 people. It's half native, maybe 20% Inuit, and the rest are white. And trappers, a lot of self-sufficiency,
Okay.
and very like-minded people.
Ah,
And
interesting.
but the good story was ending in Good Hope because the culture was thriving. And then the muskox that I saw in the forest, they had never been there before. And the natives said, no, we have never seen muskox until 10 years ago. So that was interesting, that
Wow.
climate or whatever it was.
Right.
So
Some major changes then in
Yeah.
the last 10 years.
But I was able to get a real, for myself, I get a kind of a ground truthing of climate, region, culture. So on that expedition, I got a real good sense of wildlife, the country being wild but unpeopled, but the villages and the culture and the region, thriving and doing well.
That's so good to hear.
And it was
We are out of time. People can check your website out
Yep.
to learn more about this trip
Yeah.
and even listen to
Yeah.
your audio reports.
Yeah. They can-
www.willsteger.com.
go on the stegercenter.org. Just Google Steger Center, and
Okay.
then our website is not always current, but when you go on the website, you see sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is always current, and it always has all the latest, what I'm doing, where I'm going to be.
Okay.
So I would encourage everyone to go to Steger Center, just to stegercenter.org, Steger Center, you'll find it.
Stegercenter.org. Remember that.
Yeah, and do the newsletter, and then you'll be current.
Well, thank you again
Mara.
so much. It
Well,
was
thanks.
fascinating to hear
Good.
more details.
Good.
I've been with Will Steger, the Arctic explorer, the activist for our environment, and the educator. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next week.